Okay, welcome everybody, and welcome to the special council meeting for Tuesday, October the 8th at 7 o'clock. I want to call this meeting to order. We need a motion to adopt the agenda. Councillor Silvitz, Councillor Thompson, all those in favor? Opposed? That carries unanimously. Disclosures of pecuniary interest or the general nature thereof. Seeing none. Okay, so we have no delegations tonight. Our scheduled business, we have one item to deal with, which is a development charges background study and bylaw update amendment as per Bill 185. That sounds like it's really, really exciting. So with that, we have a presentation by Gary Scandlin, independent policy advisor with Watson and Associates. And this is a 35-minute presentation. So over to you, Mr. Scanlon. And it's always great to see you.
It is always a pleasure to be before council. So 35 minutes, I don't think I can talk that long, Mr. Mayor, but...
You are welcome to do so if you wish, though.
I can talk very slowly if you wish. So there we go. Oops, too many. Very quickly, the agenda is just to go through just a summary of development charges, what it is and what we need to do as part of the legislative process. Talk a little bit about the timelines because this is the second part of a meeting that we just had six weeks ago. So we'll talk about that and then we'll go through the proposal. Development charges, there's a mandatory public process. So part of that process, we must prepare a background study. We must have that study for a minimum out into the public for a minimum 60 days. In between that 60-day period or minimum 60 days, we must have a public meeting such as tonight. And when we fulfill all of those obligations, council can consider the bylaw. The timeline is, you can see here, this is hearkening back to some more recent changes that the province have made on development charges. We summarized that the last time we were here, but the province has made numerous changes. I think we're up to about that affect development charges. Some are up about 9 or 10 since 2020. So this is another one that was put into place, and actually it's reversing some of the policy decisions or the legislative decisions that they had made. So we're trying to now react to that and bring your bylaw into conformity. Development charges, just for the general public, they've been around since the 1950s. They are there to recover the cost of infrastructure, which is set out to accommodate growth. Infrastructure would be water mains, sewers, recreation facilities, libraries, etc. So this is a cost that's generally on a residential cost per unit, and it varies by the type of unit, and there's charges for non-residential. In very simple terms, you can see on the top, we have this cost of infrastructure. We go through each of the eligible services, and then we divide it by the growth both on the residential side and the non-residential side. And as I say, we come up with a charge per unit. Low, medium, high density units have different types of charges. And for non-residential, we do it on a cost per square foot. So it's the size of the building determines the actual amount that would be paid. Excuse me. As I've noted, the recent changes provided by the province. So Bill 185, which the legislative name of it is Cutting Red Tape to Build More Homes Act 2024. It received royal assent in the early part of June of this year. It reverses some of the changes that were made through Bill 23. Bill 23 came into effect 3 years ago. So it is making refinements to policies that they put into place. There are, within the legislative process, there are minor amendments and then formal amendments. The minor amendments are something where, such as when we adopted the additional charges for growth-related studies. That would be an amendment, like a minor amendment, which you don't have to go through a formal public process. And there's more things that are addressed through a formal amendment, and that's what we're doing in today's public meeting, is going through the more formal. You can see that the phase one, which is, we've already been through council, was to remove the mandatory phase-in. The province had put into play that when you pass a bylaw, you start off in the first year by recovering 80%, then 85, then 90, 95, and then you finally get to 100% after 5 years. They've removed that phase-in, so we have removed that. There's growth-related studies, which were to be removed, but those studies give you the opportunity to assess your master plans for roads and water mains and sewers, et cetera. So they've put that back into place to assist municipalities. A minor thing, which is modernizing the public notice requirements. It really doesn't affect you, but there are municipalities that don't have newspapers, so there was a bit of a conflict where if I don't have a public circulation newspaper, was I really in conformity with the act? So they've just modernized it. And then just a more simplified process, as we talked about, for certain minor amendments that we could bypass going through the public meeting process and just go before council. You can pass the bylaw or the amendment to the bylaw, and that's what we did for the to put the growth-related studies in place. This one is looking at two different adjustments. The first one is a reduction in the rate freeze. Now, part of what the province did was to allow for, if you come forward with a site plan application or you come forward with a zoning bylaw amendment, the day that the municipality receives the completed applications, the rate in effect at that date is frozen. And it's frozen and until 2 years after you as a council approve in whatever form those applications. So it was 24 months, and basically what they've done is they've removed it from 24 months and downsized it to 18 months. Basically saying, let's move along quickly and get the development going. So that was the major change. But they didn't give us the ability to go in and change the bylaw under a minor amendment. We have to do it through a more formal process, and that's why we're here. As well, we're making a bit of a clarification on the time frame for the redevelopment credit. If I come forward and I knock down 3 single-family homes, and then I build 10 townhouses. The way that your bylaw works is that you'd be charged 10 times the townhouse rate and subtract 3 times the single family. But the question was, at what point is that redevelopment credit starting? So we're clarifying it within the bylaw now and establishing a formal process. I'm just going back to that minor amendment that we already made. As you can see in yellow, we've added the growth-related studies. So in here, and I can't even see it, we've gone with a charge of $609 for a single-family residential unit. That's a little bit more than what was there prior to, but basically with indexing and stuff, it's basically consistent with what we had before. And then we have on the retail side, I think it's 39 cents, and then on the non-retail side is 30 cents. So we've already gone through that process. That is in effect currently in your bylaws. Now the formal amendments. As I've already described, this is relating, the big one is reducing that time frame from 24 months down to 18 months. So what we need to do is change the wording that's within each of your DC bylaws. Fairly simple, but we need to pass those amendments. It doesn't really have an impact other than for any of the the ones that have been approved so far, they would still have the 24 months. As anything from this point forward, any applications that come in will now be under the new 18-month process. When we made the presentation last time, there was a request from council because if you recall, when Bill 23 came out, staff and ourselves worked up what the full impact was, the lost revenue, because there was a number of things that were put into place, ineligible services, that the time freeze, et cetera. So initially, we were talking about $190 million as the impact for Bill 23. The mandatory phase-in was about $30 million. We've removed that now as well. The studies have been added back in. So now the impact has dropped from a loss of about $190 million down to $153 million. So still a loss, but to some extent, a somewhat better recovery than what was initially put out there. That summarizes what's before you in our background report. And as I say, when we complete tonight, there's no voting, there's no decisions basically to be made. We'll be back with the public meeting, with the formal bylaws for your consideration. And I think that's in early November. November 13th, yes. That completes my presentation, Mr. Mayor. I'm happy to answer any questions of the public or of council.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Gary. It's always a pleasure to be here. It amazes me the depth of knowledge that you have on this subject, because there's certainly a whole lot of details, and the bouncing ball seems to be bouncing around a lot in the last couple of years. So it's amazing to have your support along with our financial services staff to keep track of the bouncing ball. So at this point in time, I don't think we have any members or any delegations at all to speak tonight. So I'll bring this back to council. We do have a recommendation, which is to receive the staff report and that the draft bylaws be forwarded to November 13th for all this, and that no further public meetings are required under Section 12 of the Development Charge Act. So I need somebody to move that motion. Councillor Davidson, Councillor Tree. So any discussion on that? So go ahead, Councillor Davidson.
Thank you. And through you, Mr. Chair, thank you. Just a couple of quick questions. So on slide 11, does I think it said close to $30,000 for a single home. Is that the DC charges for that? If I understood that chart as it went whizzing by, number 11. I don't know if we can see it again.
See if we can pull that back. But yes, it's for the slide was for single detached units. And keep in mind that there's a charge that you put into play. On top of that, there's also the regional charge, and school boards can also impose a charge. So you're one of three jurisdictions that impose development charges.
Through you, Mr. Chair. So in media, developers have said things like, oh, you know, the DC charges on on one house is $120,000 or whatever. That we're only seeing part of it. So that is possible that that's the charge. That's
correct. They would be looking at the fact that they're paying for all three levels of, well, two levels of government plus the school boards.
And through you, Mr. Chair, would that money cover the cost? Like, does that money cover the cost of what we need to do for, say, a new development? Say does it cover the cost to actually make the infrastructure and create and build what we need to create that new neighborhood?
Simply put, no. In 1989, when they first came with the Development Charges Act, it was for really full cost recovery, all services, and there were nominal exemptions that were provided. Over time, starting in 1997, they've made significant overhauls, and every time they've overhauled it, for the most part, they're taking away additional cash for the municipality. So you're probably in the range of recovering from a growth perspective, about 70, maybe 75% of the cost of growth.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I guess you can't offer any insight as to where, like, this isn't a money make. right, through you, Mr. Chair, like DC charges are a necessity to build the roads and the curbs and the sewers for a new development. It's not a money maker where we're stashing money as a municipality, are we?
No, the way that the calculations are done is we identify the growth and we look at the infrastructure that's needed to support that growth. So it's capital projects. So the money isn't going anywhere magical. It's, you must set it aside in a reserve and it must be used for those projects. New water mains, new sewers, expansion of roads, stormwater, et cetera.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair. Is there any guidance from the provincial government where shortfalls are to be made up by the municipalities?
No.
Through you, Mr. Chair, is there like 153.3 million is going to be what we're going to go in the hole, so to speak, so we won't have. Is there any leeway if the municipality can't afford to make up that money that we're not collecting, the other 25% or 30%? What is our ability to say no to a development because we just can't afford to build the infrastructure? We're not bringing in enough. So we have to start saying no. Because what worries me conversely is I know in Arizona and other places it's for a different reason, but houses are being built that can't hook up to main water, can't hook up to main sewers. So what's our ability to control costs and be realistic about what we can afford instead of rubber stamping everything that comes through?
There are limitations on what you can do to restrict it. I'm not gonna stand in the shoes of your planner, but I would talk from perhaps a capacity perspective. If you're deeming that your certain areas, the pipes or like the stormwater management facilities cannot take the additional development, there are some municipalities that have called a freeze on any further development, given that they don't have the capacity, water capacity, sewer capacity, storm water management capacity. Those are the three key services that would allow you to make some decision to slow down or restrict growth.
You, Mr. Chair. But if a municipality doesn't have that 30% to make up for the DC charges and the existing infrastructure won't carry a brand new development, that seems like an argument to freeze whatever we can't afford rather than, like, I'm not quite sure where this magical thinking is that, okay, well, we're going to go in debt 153 million. Well, what if we don't want to do that? What's our recourse?
Outside of getting your planner to give some insights, I don't think you have a lot of opportunities.
Mr. Mayor, my last question. So there's no protection for the municipality in any of these acts that if you don't have that 153 million, if you don't want to go in the red, if you don't have the sewers and the, you guys control the development. That's not really how this is working, right?
That's true. I think maybe the perspective is a response that you may get from out there is, well, lower your standards. Don't build any more arenas or pools and such, and just have bigger lineups or, the inability to service the people to use the facilities. That may be the answer that you would get is lower your expectations on service levels. And that's as far as I can probably answer.
Mr. Chair, and I want development, but the clean water part and the flushing toilets and all that, that's not a standard that can be lowered. But
No.
Anyway, thank you so much.
My pleasure.
Thank you very much. Councillor Tree, did you have any comments? No? Okay. Regional Local Councillor Deputy Mayor Chan.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Thank you for the presentation. It's always good to be efficient in less than 35 minutes. Thank you. I think that today's purpose, as is stated in the beginning, is a public meeting, right? It's part of the process. We're doing this. And from what I'm seeing, it's we might not really call it minor, but in a sense, it is minor. The amendment we're dealing with today, is it not, Mr. Chair?
It's through the mayor, through the chair. Yeah, they're not significant changes we're making. These are, well, number one, there is the legislation that says you must change the timelines, and we had written the timelines in the bylaw. So now legislatively, it says you can go down to 18 months. You could go longer, but we're suggesting that you go with the shorter period. The other one is a clarification, so there's no confusion, and we don't want to get into any conflicts. We want to be as express as possible.
Right. And I don't think it's intent of tonight's meeting, but I recall previous meeting we had before we got to those tables, benchmarking and things like that with the other municipalities. I believe that's, so the figures we're seeing in some of the slides already taken into consideration from previous studies. Just want to confirm from
Yes.
Mr. Chair. Yes, okay, good. I think that I'm supporting the motion in front of us. And my takeaway is that, I mean, 153.3 million estimated loss is still a lot. Follow up on my colleague, Councilor Davidson's questioning, but far better than 190.3 that we thought before 185 comes in. So to me, that's, I don't want to call it good. That would be a refreshing takeaway. So thank you on that, on confirming that. And thank you, Mr. Chair. Happy to support the motion in front of us. And hopefully, who knows, maybe a Bill 195 would even help us to get the number lower. Thank you. I wish.
Okay, thank you. Regional Local Councilor DePaulo.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm just hoping I'm correctly following the bouncing ball. I think we had a handle on it initially when our treasurer informed us of the shortfall that we'd be experiencing. And is it the case that if we were to hit housing targets, that we would be compensated, partially compensated, fully compensated for the losses that are proposed? Or
Through the chair, I'll answer that in two parts. There was a letter that came out from the former Minister of Municipal Affairs who said that, really growth, the key growth infrastructure, if you go with your targets, you would be compensated. But really that comes down to just water and wastewater. It doesn't come, it's really not for roads or other services. So there was a letter that was sent out. And it comes in the form of grants. But grants are based on eligibility and based on criteria of the day from the province. So it's not automatic. It's and I'm not exactly sure how the criteria works for municipalities receiving some level of grants.
Okay, but the prerequisite to even applying for the grants is that you hit your targets. Is that it?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Now,
So
they've been through the chair. Originally, it sounded like, well, you get it once you get to the end of the 10 years. But I think now they're saying, okay, if things are moving along reasonably well, then the province would make available some funding, and that's what we've seen in other communities.
right. So very different from the blanket statements that were made by the government initially when they, about making municipalities whole in this whole exercise. Even if you're hitting targets and you may qualify for a portion of grants, I don't think anyone's going to fully recover, regardless of hitting targets.
Well, as I say through the chair, if you read carefully the letter, it didn't say it would make you whole for all of your services. What it suggested is for the key services such as water and wastewater, that would be what would be eligible. My interpretation of those words, because it was, I know it got, all of a sudden I'm hearing from others that they're going to make us completely whole. And that's not, I've read the letter many times, and I don't believe that's what it says.
Right. No, I wasn't referring to their letters. I'm referring to just statements that are made in the public, and often they differ greatly from what's in letters or legislation or regulations. And so that's what we're grappling with. Thank you very much for your, following this closely and making sure that we're in compliance. We have to do that. So I'll support the motion.
Okay, thank you very much, Councillor. Anybody else? Okay, so I really appreciate this, as I said, and I certainly support the motion going forward. I think the way I see this, Bill 185 is good news, but it's not great news. It's certainly a step in the right direction. And when I was talking to Minister Calandra at AMO, I mean, I would acknowledge that some Bill 185 takes some of the more egregious parts of Bill 23 and it reverses them. Now, granted, we've spent a lot of time trying to comply with Bill 23, so we have wasted a bit of time, but at least we've got us back on a better plane than we were with Bill 23. But I think this conversation has touched on this, that we still need more support. Like the problem with DCs is that they do pay for as much growth as we can get. And if we don't pay for growth through DCs, we pay for growth through taxes, which is completely unfair given that property taxes are very regressive and not great form of taxation as it stands. And it is completely unfair to expect the existing residents of a community to pay for growth for somebody else's ability to live in your community. So while DCs may be imperfect, they're about as good as we can get that I can think of. And as you touched on, we were happy to get some money from the provincial government for their building water. I can't remember the name of it, the building water fund. But as I mentioned today in the speech I gave at the Board of Trade, we're not going to get the Building Faster Fund because it's measuring us on something that we have no control over. So all of these grants and little piecemeal pieces to help to compensate and make us whole or more whole aren't happening. So we still have a lot of work to do in advocacy with the provincial government as far as I'm concerned. I do just want to talk a little bit, though, in response to some stuff I've heard recently from the Organization for the Building Industry Build. And they were, suggesting, as they have done in the past, and I find it very disappointing, that DCs are out of control. They've gone up so much, but the cost of the things that DCs build have also gone up, which they should know better than anybody about. And, also that the DCs are unfair and that, they're something that is stopping housing affordability and all that kind of stuff. But what they're not saying is that the DCs are counted on to build the kind of communities that they would want to sell houses in. So I really think that there is also some advocacy and frankly some pushback on some of the very disappointing things that we've heard recently from the build. And I think it's really important to remember that if we take away DCs, which we are seeing here, it has to be replaced from some other source. And if the province wants to replace it with some other source that's sustainable, that's fair, that's equitable, and that takes the burden off of the property taxpayer, then I'm all for that. That's fine. But unless we see further changes in a further bill that comes out in the next little while, that is not the landscape that we're dealing with right now. So anyway, that being said, I do appreciate this. I mean, I guess it is good news to know that we're not seeing a bunch of people in the building industry coming out and complaining today. And I presume that we've done consultation with the building industry when we've done any of these types of consultations. I'm seeing nodding heads. So hopefully when this passes on November the 13th, it will be met with, at least happiness in the building industry or something resembling happiness. I don't know. Anyway, but thank you very much for the work that you've done. We have a motion on the floor then, unless there's any other speakers. So all those in favor, opposed, okay, that carries unanimously. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And seeing how this is a council meeting, we need a bylaw to confirm the proceedings of this council meeting. Councillor Thompson, Councillor Davidson, all those in favor? Opposed, that carries. And we have a move to adjourn. Seconder, Councillor Tree, all those in favor? Okay, thank you very much, everybody. Have a great evening.